Hello, hello. Hello, all. Welcome, welcome. I can see many lovely faces again with us. Hello, everyone. It's my pleasure to welcome you back on behalf of Y Summits. We're continuing for another event of the day. I can see one of our panelists just went to maybe grab a cup of tea. Hopefully, everyone's got a refreshment drink ready. And while Ilse is back, I'm actually going to say that we're back for another lovely, wonderful panel discussion. This one is going to be on stakeholder management, mergers and acquisitions, and strategic alliances and joint ventures. So quite a topic to cover. And not to stress you, we've got 30 minutes. It's going to be wonderful. So please let me start by saying a little bit about Tom Schiavon. He's here as a moderator, actually, as well as the panelist for this discussion. Tom is the Senior Manager in Clinical Systems, Ultragenics Pharmaceuticals. We've got Martin here with us. Hello, Martin. Actually, hello, Tom, as well. Hello, Martin. Martin Mazzetti, she's the CEO of Martin Mazzetti Consulting, and she's the Chief of Staff at Vectiv Bio. We've got Monica Sharma. She was actually here with us just a little earlier for a panel discussion as well. Monica Sharma, she's a global team leader, program and alliance manager for Ascentage Pharma. And hello, we've got our Ailsa Mendez back.
Hey,
hello. And Ailsa is the Executive Director, Biotechnological Operations for PPD. It's an honor to have you all here. I am so very pleased. I could not wait for the entire event to actually come to be live and what it is. So please, I'm going to give you my word, and I'm very excited to hear about all you've got to say, I'm sure, as all the attendees. So please, hello again and welcome.
Thank you.
Tom, I think you're on mute. We don't hear you.
Yeah, I can't hear.
How's that?
Far better.
Yeah, fabulous start. Moderating pro. So as Katie mentioned, my name is Tom Schiavon, and I'll be moderating the panel. She introduced everyone, and I'm sure you can see that we've got a lot of really great expertise to talk about stakeholder management. And so we'll quickly go ahead and get started. And just wanted to make sure that as we start this discussion, we're kind of all on the same page. So I'm going to give you some brief introductions, then I'm going to allow everyone to kind of join in and maybe add some color or nuance to each of these definitions. And so when we say we're talking about mergers and acquisitions, we're talking about when ownership of companies, organizations, or operating units are transferred or consolidated to another company. So there's a lot of reasons why this could happen, especially in the wider pharmaceutical industry. We've seen this frequently with larger companies acquiring smaller ones, and especially with CROs in the past few years. Organizations can use the process to grow, downside, or gain an improved competitive position in the industry. In contrast, a joint venture allows two organizations to pool resources in a more equal arrangement, leveraging each's expertise in research, marketing, or some other commercial or scientific actions. It may be driven by local access restrictions, better access to distribution channels, or possibly even in anticipation of a future acquisition. And then a strategic partnership can help an organization gain access to new technologies, platforms, or manufacturing capacities. One example could be a company licensing access to AAV vectors for development of a gene therapy candidate, let's say. It can help organizations mitigate risk and costs and enter emerging markets with less investment. Does anybody want to jump in and add some color contrast to that, or just kind of build out those definitions a little bit?
I think they're perfect.
Yeah, you covered it perfectly. I just maybe one quick sort of nuance. I guess in the context of strategic partnerships, a lot of times there is not a financial transaction, right? Unlike mergers and acquisitions, where you are acquiring for the reasons Tom outlined. So it could be just sort of milestone based or something, but there is not like a financial sort of big exchange or transaction. I don't know how the other panelists' experience is, but at least that's sort of my experience, and that's how I kind of like differentiate in a big way versus mergers and acquisitions.
Yeah, that rings true, Monica, because I think joint ventures are like, sort of equity investments. Strategic partnership could be considered sort of non-equity, type investments as well. Yeah. So similarly.
Yeah. Thank you.
All right, well, let's jump into the first question then. And Martine, why don't you start us off with some best practices for proactively managing some of those different relationships?
Thank you, Tom. I think I may start with a little anecdote. When I started my career, I worked in a company which was called Salvia in Germany, which was a satellite from Boehringer Mannheim. So already you have a strategic partnership because we were a satellite. 1 or 2 years later, we were acquired by a company which was called Cleantech for clinical nutrition, who was a joint venture between Nestle and Baxter, 3-level relationship. 10 years later, I worked at Roche in Basel, and guess what? Roche acquired Boehringer Mannheim for a certain part of the portfolio, which is a diagnostica, which I think are quite in focus these days with the pandemic. So as you see, in all this carousel of changes, I think the one thing I learned is you might be surprised by the way you live the partnership because people come from different culture, different companies, different size. But I think what for me was the most important thing is to invest time in and energy in understanding your partner, what drives him, where he's coming from, what he wants to achieve, what culture he has, and how you fit or not fitting together. In the first example, when I worked in this very little company, which was a satellite from Boehringer Mannheim, which was acquired by a joint venture, I think one unique feature we had is a language barrier. Because in that time, speaking German, speaking French, speaking English, and working together was something new. So the one person who speaks 3 languages and knows a little bit the culture has an incredible advantage in terms of being in the right place to understand and manage the partnership and gets in focus, which means that for me, another learning was that you have to find the person and the people or the organization or the governance who bridge between the different partners and build on that. So you build on things you have in common or people you have in common. But I'm sure there's more than that in terms of experience with my colleagues. So I would like to ask Monica maybe to give her view as the next one.
Sure. I thought, Elsa, did you want to add something as well? Because I know we have had some discussions ahead of this conversation, and Elsa had some very good thoughts.
Yeah, sure. I think, one of the things that we talked about this particular topic was, partnerships come together for accretive value, right? That's the reason either I do something a little bit differently or better, but both of us together as a partnership are trying to grow, whether it's profits or revenue or market share. And what I found too as a best practice is not just having those conversations at the C-suite level, but also having those conversations at all the line function head level as a best practice as well, because you have to bring the entire organization along when you do that. So it's not just enough to have the 2 CEO heads of companies or the venture capitalists or even the heads of R&D thinking about the partnership. They've got to bring along their entire organization as well. So in setting it up, one of the things for managing relationship right out of the gate is making sure across the organization you have key people within each of the line functions that are on the same page with the goals.
Yeah.
Excellent. So Monica, I'm actually going to save you for the next question, and without giving any kind of I'm not saving you because you're more prone to mistakes, but just to give you a little bit of an intro here. What's a real life mistake that you made, and what did you learn from it in the process of working through these relationships?
Great question. So I will say that I have made a lot of mistakes, but today is not about me, but in the context of the mergers and acquisitions and the challenges that we are speaking about. I would say during my career journey, I was working for a small biotech and we got acquired by large pharma, and Martine perhaps experienced that in the same company as well. So one of the challenges that we came across initially during the earlier stages was, they were competing agendas. We were primarily like an R&D company, and now there was big pharma who had commercialized multiple products, so they had their own governance, stage gating processes, right? So there was this perception of the value mismatch, which started to sort of permeate the ranks for people who were not part of the management level conversations. That sort of started to get amplified. And I think one of the things that the management did was quickly sort of recognize that and put an integration team in place, and that sort of help level set sort of, what is that cohesive strategy going to be? We have products in the pipeline now that are early stage and late stage. So how are we going to go about, the governance process? How are we going to sort of align all the stakeholders? How are we going to see the value realized from this partnership, right? Because there is a study that came out in 2018. It's a study by Bain, which talks about the value of mergers and acquisitions versus strategic partnerships. And this was a strategic partnership. And as per that study, the strategic partnerships are a better value realization for companies that are looking for agility, companies that are looking for innovation. So the good thing with this was, yes, there were mistakes. Yes, there were lessons to be learned, but the challenge was recognized earlier on by the management, and they put an integration team in place. And I think that would be one recommendation or lesson learned that I would want to share with companies that are going to go through this process, to sort of have an integration team in place, define clearly the lines of accountability. And then the other thing, last but not the least, from my point of view, would be we are all stellar communicators to an extent after having been in this field. But I think when it comes to mergers and acquisitions or strategic partnerships, we have to be stellar communicators that over communicate at times, right? To keep all the communication dots connected. So I think those would be some challenges that I have lived and breathed, and some lessons that I've learned along the way.
Obviously, you weren't the only one to make mistake. Anybody else want to chime in?
Yeah, maybe one which I think I still remember vividly. In one of the stands of acquisitions, one drive of the partner was to acquire technology. So I think it relates to what you said, Monica, about communicating. So this technology we had developed in our little corner and we're very proud of, but it was not completely, validated and approved. And despite the fact that at that time I was in regulatory and did everything to get the approval, I didn't had enough communication in the company, maybe naive in my time, because once I got the approval, I realized that the manufacturing of that technology was not yet at the stage of being used. So, which of course for the partner who bought us for that reason was quite a brutal awakening. So, if you like, mistakes on 3 levels, being ambitious and running. Second level, believing my manufacturing head who was yelling at me why I'm never finishing my filing while he's ready. He wasn't. And thirdly, I think managing the relationship with a partner who thought that I was a critical path and the problem of my department. And in reality, I think we ended up in a very, bad situation of a lot of expectation and hopes being broken. So one thing, over communicate. I really endorse that, Monica.
Can I just pick up on that? What was the eventual outcome of that, since the asset wasn't, quite ready for showtime? What was the eventual outcome?
It was bloody. We were reorganized. I think.
Yeah, those are
it was not harmless, put it that way.
Yeah.
And the manufacturing guy got, of course, at the end, the real blame because he was hiding a little bit. But of course, in a small company, hiding is not a reason not to understand it. So I think there's 2 elements. One, I was really upset about myself. The secondly, because But I was really more upset about myself because of the consequences. Of course, nobody died. That's a good news. But of course, people and organization changed. Trust was broken. We had to reacquire it. And it was good for the next 30 years of my career, put it that way.
I think what I want to echo along that, something that Monica had said that sort of resonated with me with regards to the integration team. It's also being aware early on in the alliance when you're setting it up. I've been involved where we have in-licensed assets from other companies, and they have a sort of a minor role to play within the partnership. But, this was sort of their asset and pipeline and baby. And so they feel like they have a major role to play in the decision-making, even though it's not quite there from a contractual perspective. And they get placed on the alliance product development teams and stuff. And, what I've learned there from a lessons learned is to really try to identify, it's really important, culture aspect, right? So sort of identify, who will go along with the goals established by the partnership and who likely, be sort of the torpedo, person in the room. But if that person is valuable from a knowledge, a scientific, otherwise operational perspective, research, find a way to do some kind of coaching because you don't want to lose that in the partnership. But yeah, if it can't be managed or coached, then you have to really be aware of that sometimes in those types of relationships where it might seem a little lopsided from a decision-making standpoint, that the partner who out-licensed the asset, feels less and less ownership and struggles with the partnership. Yeah.
Yeah, no, great point, Elsa. I mean, the other side of that also is, right, because the company has been acquired and the asset or the technology is being transferred, there is always the employee attrition that can happen. And part of that is you lose the SMEs that the other company might have, which might be critical to sort of enable the successful transfer of the technology or the marrying of the two companies. So recognizing that earlier on, whether it's through an integration team or stakeholder mapping, which we discussed a little bit this morning, it would be critical, I would say, because like you were saying, we don't want to lose those critical resources and lose that knowledge because somebody is feeling insecure because a company got acquired. So I think just paying attention to some of those softer side or HR side of things is also very useful.
Yeah, it sounds like at every level there was the communication was really important, like developing a vision, developing the benefit for each of the different partners or, the different groups within the relationship, people who are unsure maybe of what their future is with the company, being able to develop those items and the value propositions is not good enough if you can't have clear, open, and honest communication that sets those boundaries and expectations and things like that. So that's really great. I love everybody's responses there. So Elsa, I want to come back to you. How would you suggest strengthening struggling relationships between parties if that communication breaks down, or if there is, a mismatch of the value that's being added? How do you strengthen some of those relationships?
Yeah, I mean, I want to take, a little bit from Martine's answer in our first question with regards to best practices. So, first starting off with, as you need to set the relationship up on the right footing, right? So, when a joint venture is approached or a strategic partnership, that partnership agreement could be anywhere from 50 to 100 pages long. No one, on the product development team is going to be reading, that level of detail. So in my role in alliance management, part of what we do, taking over from the due diligence team into product development, is sort of distilling down the key things within that agreement into an alliance manual or alliance guidelines, right? And so in that, you'll have, your operational perspectives, or strategic perspectives, your goals, your missions, so really kind of distilling that down for the team, how it's going to be resourced, what the communication escalation path is going to be. So it really sits within the alliance function. So I say, first thing is making sure you're setting it off right? Things could still go off track even if you do that, right? So another thing the second thing that I've seen that's worked is having an alliance champion. You can call that person the alliance manager or the alliance sponsor. And that sits actually on both sides of the divide, right? So one person on the other side is an alliance champion for company A, and the other one for company B. And even though they work for their respective companies, being paid by their respective companies, their role is really for the success of the actual joint venture or the partnership, right? So their role is really looking at the partnership. So they're kind of agnostic as to where they, sort of sit, but having that alliance champion that's really dedicated towards the relationship, setting things off correctly, onboarding people onto the relationship, things like that. I think having that agnostic person so that you are, a source for, issues that might crop up, on the alliance, whether operational, strategic, external, personal, things like that could affect the functioning of that. So I think sort of a neutral type of alliance champion. And then third, don't really underestimate the value of face-to-face. I think prior to COVID, I always, had in my alliance contracts when I, got the chance to review it to make sure that the budget ensured that we had at least an annual face-to-face for the product development teams, right, of the large teams. These people are working together across lots of geographies, really trying to put new medicines into the marketplace for patients. And it's important that sometimes you lose that connection just being on video or on the phone. And I think, when I've seen things struggle, I take the opportunity to say, hey, can we grab some time on people's calendars and come together and have a face-to-face? And it could just be around an upcoming milestone, and I use that as an opportunity to iron out other things that I'm seeing that are happening in the relationship that are struggling. But I want to make sure that that's already there, start up in the budget, because really value that face-to-face connection at the end of the day, we're people.
Yeah, that's fantastic. I wish we had like so much more time. There's so much good information here. So I'm gonna jump really quick to the last question that we have actually, and this is kind of the popcorn one, right? Everybody just pop in and share their experiences or thoughts here. So, I mean, empathy and emotional intelligence have been shown to be important in relationship management. And I think that's becoming more and more critical and aware in organizations. So how do you see that impacting stakeholder management when it comes to these different kind of really high leverage, potentially awkward, sometimes relationships?
I start this, okay? Good.
Yeah, please.
From my end, I think it's the first question, because we're all human beings, and the way we communicate successfully is using emotional intelligence and empathy. And if you look into collaboration, that's even more important, because you work with a partner you may not know as much as people you work day in, day out with. So for me, as an example, I can give you, I was on a project which we acquired in phase 2 from another company, and we shepherded in phase 3. So you had the two groups, one who said, we have worked 10 years, we know it all, it's our baby. And the others, but we are the big guys, we will make something real out of it. And if you don't understand that this emotional binding on the asset is underlying the relationship. So even if you are very transactional, you look into your project, your milestones, you work together, work package, blah, blah, you still have this feeling they are stealing my baby. And the others might still have the feeling saying this guy is hanging on something which is not the best way, because it's all, we need to do it in a different way to be successful. And then comes maybe another layers in that for the big guys who take it, the syndrome, it's not invented here. So by definition, we are far more skeptical. So in each conversation, you have the 3 layers of vibes behind. And if you don't pick that up when it plays a bigger role in the conversation that the factual and the normal discussion you have, I think that makes your life and the project progression quite difficult.
Yeah, great insights, Martine. Just a quick comment from me on this. I think I totally agree with Martine. We have to be cognizant and mindful of the emotional needs for people, because everybody's invested in a different way in the project. Some could be scientifically driven, some could be just emotionally driven because it's their baby. But what I have also sort of used having worked with global teams in different regions, I think there are cultural differences in how people communicate as well. And I think that's where the emotional intelligence and empathy come in very useful as well. Just sort of, keeping that in the back of your mind while you communicate with people in different zones, because they communicate differently. Sometimes people might come off as rude or not caring, but it's just maybe English is a second language for them, or they just communicate just like that. So sort of trying to navigate that a little bit using the EQ versus the IQ. I think that helps as well. And then what has sort of worked for me also is doing frequent check-ins one-on-one with people in difficult situations like that, because sometimes when people are in a bigger meeting, they tend to sort of either hide behind a stakeholder or because their communication preference is not to speak openly in a larger setting, they don't say what they want to say really. So having the frequent check-ins, especially during mergers and acquisitions or a strategic partnership build, I have found them very useful as well.
Yeah, I mean, I don't have very much to add on that. I think you both, said that really well. And I think of empathy. I'm thinking, well, we work hard at our jobs. It's a small part of who we are, right? We all have lives outside of work, and to recognize that for our team members, right? Because sometimes, a struggle that might show its case, within the office, it's really something that could be external to the work environment, right? So being attuned to that, which I think is what Monica was talking about as well. And from an emotional intelligence standpoint, I think then, alliances are hard. It's hard enough doing drug development when it's your own asset, it's coming up through your research pipeline, and you seeing it, grow in to the clinic and get launched. It's harder when you have to partner that with someone else, or there's a joint venture, or there's an acquisition. It's really tough and it's really hard. Not just from a decision-making standpoint, but we've all said here, culturally as well. So I think paying attention to some of those emotional cues that we see on our team members would help there from that perspective.
Yeah, I think that's great. I mean, one of the things that I observed when I got into the industry is how really global it is, and multicultural and diverse, and those are all really exciting things, especially with so many people across the world, and working with them about being passionate about really the end goal of all this is empathy and resolving or helping patients have better lives and better quality of life, and just to be happier and spend time with their family. So, but while that is really a great thing, the diversity and that kind of thing, it could bring lots of challenges, especially, M&A is probably easiest one to see, where you've got one coming in and saying, "You're mine now," right? So, but all of those, there's personalities, and the humanity can be a really strong point, or it can be a real challenge. So that's definitely one of the more difficult layers. But really where someone in that project or portfolio management position can really add a lot of value when they can have that emotional intelligence and empathy in a positive way and drive the projects further, for that end goal of helping patients. So, but I think we're about at time. I think, Katie, did you?
That's why I'm here, to kind of scare everyone off. But honestly, this was, I love how you started up all, data and science based, and we've kind of naturally just you've naturally guided it into the human factor, and it was really wholesome to listen to it. I mean, I'm here in the background, I'm not doing anything, I'm actually listening to all of you talk as well, and it was very wholesome. And I love the fact that, exactly as Elsa said, this is our job, and at the end of the day, which is actually my kind of end of the day right now, it's a very late here in Slovakia, but at the end of the day, we do have we're human beings, and we do have other things to do, and considering the emotional to everything else that we do is very needed. And I love that you brought it up, because I think it takes sometimes a long time to remind it to people. So with this one, I would just like to thank you all for accepting my invitation on behalf of Y Summits to come and join me here. And I wish you all, to really enjoy this conference to the fullest. And we are going to continue with our other panel discussion. It's like we're rolling with the panel discussions now. So thank you all so much. Thank you, Monica, Elsa, Martin. Thank you, Tom. Wonderful moderating as well. Great. And I'm going to see you very, very shortly for our panel discussion. Thank you so much.
Thank you, Tom, for moderating. Take care.
Thank you. Thank you, everybody.